Hello again, I'm Paula Gooder in conversation with Rowan Williams, talking about his book Discovering Christianity. Here we are in our final session, talking about why does it matter? So Rowan, we've been wide-ranging in our conversation from what Christianity is, through theology, thinking about who God is, looking at scripture, tradition and reason, and we've had a rich conversation. And now we've got a moment to take stock and to pause and say, well, why does it matter?
It matters to me because I believe Christianity opens doors, gives us more room to live in, more room for our hearts and our minds, our feelings, our aspirations. We're used to living in, as you might say, in rather smaller quarters than we deserve as human beings. And part of my passion about Christian faith is that it gives us that extra space. It tells us more about human beings. It tells us that we're made in the image of God. It tells us that we can live in intimacy and love with God. It tells us that the reality, the ongoing reality of the life of Jesus of Nazareth is something that expands our humanity and gives us new reach, new imagination. And not least, it shows us how human community can become a community of gift and trust and generosity rather than hostility and tribalism. Now, all of that seems to be pretty relevant to the kind of world we live in at the moment. And I want to help people see that Christian faith is not just a set of rather eccentric views that a minority of people in the Western world hold, but is something you can think with and feel with and imagine with, and allows you to move into a more adequate and full-blooded response to the reality and the truth that is there.
And to people who are interested but feel a little bit overwhelmed, I wonder what advice you would give. Often I think when I'm thinking about talking to people about the glories of the Christian tradition, it's almost as though you've turned on a big power hose and gone, here it is, all of it. If people want to say, yes, I am interested, but it all just feels a bit much, where are the next steps for them?
I would hope that local Christian communities can be hospitable enough to people who are a bit nervous about it all. And people are, and with good reason. They feel that the church can appear like a secret society where you've got to know the insider's handshake before you can be allowed in. The door makes a noise when you push it. Yes. A great big metal handle on the door which clanks as you open it and you feel conspicuous. Now, I'm exaggerating and stereotyping, but that's how people see it. That's where, in a way, some of what I'm saying in the book is addressed to the churches as well. Look, try to find the unthreatening open door that will allow these conversations to unfold. And that's where I turn in the last chapter, as elsewhere, to those really remarkable words in St. John's Gospel where Jesus says to those who are interested in talking with him, come and see. Where do you live? Say the first apostles to Jesus, come and see, says Jesus. And that come and see, to me, is a hugely important invitation. But if we as a church are going to say come and see, we'd better look at our backyard and make sure that there's something worth seeing. That all that we say about the overwhelming love of God, the joy of worship, the generosity of common life, that does actually match up a little bit to the ideals.
That's one of the really hard things, isn't it? Yes. Is for those of us, I mean, I've been all of my life in the church, and you can't get away from the fact that what I want to showcase about who God is and why God changes the world and how amazing the love of God is so often not matched up by the reality of church communities, of even the way I behave. And how do we, there's that phrase, somebody said to me once, somebody said to me, I don't want to come to your church, it's full of hypocrites. Yes. To which they responded, well, it's not quite full. You're very welcome. But we all do have to be realistic and say we have our aspiration and we have the reality. And so often the two don't match.
And sometimes our ability to say that honestly and clearly is part of the invitation. It's to say, look, we think we've got something unbelievably precious here. And we also know perfectly well that we're making a complete pig's ear of realising it. And the great thing about what we believe is that it makes it all right for us to admit that we're making a pig's ear of it. Yes. We don't have to pretend we've got it right, because this is not about us, it's about God. Now, if we can be really clear about that and say part of what we have to offer is honesty, then maybe that's an essential aspect of the invitation, because it says to people, A, you can be honest here, and B, it means that your failures are not the last word. That's the good news, so we don't have to pretend. Trouble is, that's a message that the churches are not all that good at assimilating for themselves. We still think we've got to be right all the time.
Yes, and it's so interesting, isn't it? How we know that we aren't, and yet we feel that we should be.
Yes. And I think people respond more when we are honest about our vulnerability and honest about where we've got it wrong, because that's the way we point to God. This is a God whose faithfulness cannot be defeated by the mess we make of it.
And clearly in our conversation, Christianity, your love of God, shines through. Can you tell us a little bit more about why the love of God is so important to you?
The love of God matters because it's the foundation of believing not only that I matter, but that everybody else matters. It lights up the face of the neighbour. And maybe that's one of the most important things we can say about the love of God. Not just that I'm loved, but that the unlikely person on the other side of the room, saving your presence, Paula, is loved. The unlikely person I see on the tube or the bus, the unlikely person on the other side of the world whose image flashes across a screen, they're loved by God, and that means I can have something to hope for every other that I meet because of the love of God. They're there because of the love of God, and so they matter because of the love of God. And I find that such an overwhelming, a revolutionary picture. And it disturbs me, and I realise how little I respond to it adequately. But there it is. That's why it matters.
Rowan, it's been great talking to you over these past 8 sessions. And we hope that you've enjoyed our conversation and that our conversation has triggered in you conversations in the groups that you might find yourselves in, or even just to think some new thoughts.